So it's been a while since I've done one of these obscure top 10 lists. I'd been thinking about doing top 10 obscure Sega Genesis gems for a while, but I had just been playing some games and an idea struck me. We all know that there's particularly annoying enemies in a lot of NES games. Probably the most famous example I can think of are the Hammer Brothers in Super Mario Bros. They toss out so many hammers and bounce between platforms that they're very hard to pass. Another really famous example are the Red Devils in Ghosts and Goblins. Nobody likes those guys. They fly all over the place in unpredictable patterns, which will leave even the most veteran, hardcore NES experts yanking their hair out. Another total fuckwad is Phantos in Super Mario Bros. 2. He's a little bit similar to the Red Devil in that he flies in the air and follows you around relentlessly. At least that guy, though, you can drop the key to get him off your back. And who can forget the Medusa heads in Castlevania? Some of the most annoying enemies of all time. The way they hit you and make you fly back, usually to your death. So those are some of the more well-known examples of annoying enemies in NES games, but let's talk about some of the rat bastards that have gone under the radar and deserve some spotlight for their aggravating behavior. One thing that I want to note before I start, I'm picking enemies that I find to be cheap and unfair. For example, one might wonder why I don't choose the Medusas from Adventures of Lolo. Sure, they're annoying, but they aren't really cheap. You just need to learn how to solve the puzzle for each stage. Once you do, all the enemies in Adventure of Lolo are perfectly fair. But anyway, let's get started. This is Cinemassacre's Top 10 Obscure NES Assholes. Number 10, The Crow in Mickey Mousecapade. Okay, this one's a little bit debatable, and that's why it's number 10. Anybody that's ever played this game hates Minnie Mouse because she trails behind you and she gets you killed. For example, if you're trying to make a jump, Mickey might make the jump fine, but Minnie could fall off. If she just wasn't there, you wouldn't have died. Minnie is really just an annoying nuisance throughout the entire game. But unfortunately, you need to have her because that's the only way to get the double shot, which makes you twice as powerful. So it's a double-edged sword. So sometimes there's an enemy that comes along and steals her away. Now part of me feels like, thank God she's gone. I almost want to thank that guy for taking her away, but in actuality, it's a huge pain in the ass because you need to get her back so that you can have the double shot weapon. This motherfucking guy comes out of nowhere to steal her away, and it forces you to rescue her, and you don't even want to rescue her. Fuck that guy. Number 9, The Big Men in Ghosts and Goblins. Ghosts and Goblins is one of the hardest games on the NES. As I mentioned before, the Red Devils are the famous example of cheap enemies in the game. But you know what else was cheap as fuck? Those big men that dwell within certain structures throughout stages 2, 5, and 6. They wander back and forth over their patrol areas. Now the best idea is to just try to avoid them. But sometimes you just can't make a run for it because there's another one blocking the ladder. It's a very annoying situation to go through, but it can be dealt with if you have the knife. The main problem with them is that they take too many hits to kill. If you don't have enough room, you can't get in enough hits. Fuck these assholes. Number 8, Soldiers in Contra. Contra is a great game, but it's not exempt of its troublesome enemies. The sequel, Super C, had those damn Hawkmen that drop down as you're trying to go up. They're really hard to avoid and they pop up out of nowhere. But the things that I really can't stand are in the original game. First are the mines as you're running through the bases. It was a cool concept, running into the distance in an almost 3D environment on an 8-bit system. That was something you rarely saw any NES game do. My point is, running in a 3D environment is what makes the situation awkward. When those mines start coming out, you either have to shoot them or jump over them. Jumping over them is usually a bad idea because the perspective is hard to judge. If you have the spread gun, it's a piece of cake, but if you're trying to jump over them, they really suck. The most cheap guy in the game, however, is the regular soldier on the gun turret. Now sometimes these guys are fine, but other times they pop up without any warning. The only way to know this guy's coming and to be able to avoid him is to have played the game before. They just appear really quick on the edge of the screen, and if you're not already prepared to duck as fast as possible, you're dead. Fuck! Coming in at number 7, we got the Rippers from Metroid. Now, Metroid was one of the greatest games on the system, but it did have its share of some pretty annoying enemies. For example, the Rippers. Anybody remember the Rippers? No, not Jesse and the Rippers. The Rippers from Metroid. What, you don't remember those? Well, of course you don't, because they're one of a million other tiny little crappy enemies that you fight in the game. You should remember them though, because one of them even makes an appearance right on the front of the box. It's more prominent than fucking Samus herself. Now, why are they assholes? Well, for one thing, they can't be killed. They're also tiny, and jumping on them can be really difficult. You have to jump on them after you freeze them, but they're really difficult to shoot because they're so thin. Look at this! Are you kidding me? Now pretty much everybody remembers Samus pulling off her helmet at the end of the game to reveal that she's a girl. Well, they should have also had this thing shed its exoskeleton and reveal that inside, he's actually just an asshole. Might as well be, it looks like a fucking turd. Number 6, Roadkill Rodney from TMNT 2, the arcade game. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, was a port of the original Ninja Turtles game in the arcade. It's harder than the arcade game because it goes on for longer. There's added levels like the snow and the samurai stage. It's a relatively fun game if you like beat 'em ups, but it can get boring killing foot soldiers over and over. But it's not quite as redundant as Ikari Warriors or Rampage. Now, like I said, most of the enemies in the game are some kind of variation of a foot soldier. But there are other enemies in the game every so often. The ones that I hate are the robots on wheels known as Roadkill Rodneys. They're not too difficult to defeat or anything, they're just annoying to fight. They grab you with robotic tentacles that electrocute you, and while that's happening, you can't move. But the worst part is trying to hit them. The way they roll around, you have to be on the right plane to be able to hit them, and you'll often end up missing because of the wonky perspective. The fight with Baxter Stockman is just as annoying. He's flying all over the place in a small spaceship. Since he's in the air, you have to jump kick him, and again, if you're not on the same plane as he's on, you'll miss. Now, I know that you can follow the shadow on the ground around, but it's just an annoying fight. And you know what? Why wouldn't they have him be in fly form anyway, like in Turtles in Time? What an asshole. Number 5, the kids from Kung Fu. Originally called Kung Fu Master in the arcade, the NES port, simply titled Kung Fu, had its share of annoying enemies without a doubt. First are the pots that fall from the ceiling that release the snakes. The pots appear out of nowhere and will smash you on the head. There's zero indication when they're coming, so you just have to keep moving. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the exploding confetti balls that shoot you while you're trying to jump over the snake. I'm somehow not too bad at this section usually, but I think it's still a frustrating situation. The enemies that are truly assholes are the kids that are trying to dry hump your legs. This is a game all about movement. You're constantly walking, punching, and kicking. You're like an unstoppable force, until these little fuckers come along to slow you down. It's really aggravating to get slowed down like that, let alone because some kid is trying to fuck your ankle. Complete and utter assholes. Number 4, that tank in Batman. Batman on the NES was famous for being one of the few movie-based games on the system that was actually good, but it was very difficult. So on the third stage of the game, there's an enemy that's called Jader. He looks like a big robotic ape. He sits there waiting for Batman to approach. When you get near him, he hops all over the screen, easily depleting your life meter. And as if that's not bad enough, when that's going on, the little rolling Death Star droid with the spikes is going around crashing into Batman's ankles. Now, if you have the right projectile weapons, they can be killed before they're even given a chance to move. But if you don't have any weapons, they can be some of the most annoying enemies from any game because they just will not get off of you. The other enemies in the game that really suck are the tanks in the cave levels. They roll back and forth, shooting fireballs constantly. You need to have lightning fast reflexes because they start firing the millisecond they appear on the side of the screen. Sometimes they even fire when they're totally off the screen. It is fucking cheap. Once again, easy enemies if you have weapons, but the cave is big and there's lots of them. Worse yet, if you get knocked down, they'll respawn. According to the game's manual, they're called EEV. I have no idea what that stands for, but I imagine it stands for Evil Emotionless Vaginas. Number 3, the Red Axe guys from Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. It's a polarizing game. A lot of people hate it, and a lot of people love it. I can understand both. But regardless if you think the game is a steaming pile of shit or one of the best the franchise has to offer, the thing I think we can all agree on is that the red axe-throwing lizard dudes in Death Mountain are pretty fucking absurd. I actually love Zelda 2. It definitely has some issues, the main issue being that it ramps up in difficulty too quickly. Right after the first level, they throw Death Mountain in your face, which is the hardest part of the game other than the final stage. Inside of Death Mountain, you'll find orange-colored lizards that have axes. These brutes are after Link's head. They're tough, but they're manageable, and that's because they don't toss their axes. The red lizards are a different story, however. These cocksuckers do not give a fuck. They will toss their axes wherever the fuck they please. They are totally crazy. The only way to really get by them is to use the shield magic combined with the jump magic and hope for the best. Fucking assholes. Number 2, the satellites in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. How would we be able to get through a list of worst enemies without talking about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? It's considered one of the worst and hardest games on the system. I've beaten the game, and I can contest to that fact. The game really does suck. It's not my least favorite NES game. That honor goes to Back to the Future 2 and 3. But still, Jekyll and Hyde is terrible. But let's get to the point. Which enemy in the game is the worst? There's the fat lady, and she's unbelievably annoying because of the way she shoots out musical notes. You're trying to walk to the right the whole game, and she's pushing you back with those notes. There's so many of them that they're nearly impossible to avoid. Those piss me off, but it gets worse. The spiders. They move up and down in a totally random pattern. Getting past them can be a total nightmare because not only do they not move when you need them to, but there's other obstacles that are being hurled at you while you're trying to do it. Terrible. Now, I could go on naming more enemies in the game that suck, but let's talk about my absolute least favorite enemy. I don't even know what they're called, but I refer to them as satellites. According to the game's manual, they're actually called palma. They're red spiked balls that fly across the screen. They explode into fragments that hurt. So here's why they suck so bad. When you're Hyde, you're trying to kill enemies, which raises your Jekyll meter to transform you back into the good doctor. Remember, the goal of the game is to go to your wedding, so you want to be Jekyll, not Hyde. One way or the other though, you're gonna have to be Hyde at some point whether you like it or not. So usually when I'm in Hyde mode, I'm trying to kill the hopping brains as they tend to fill up the meter more than the other enemies. But as I'm trying to do that, the red satellites fly through the air, explode, and take away nearly all my health. The amount of damage that they do is insane. They will drain almost your entire life bar in one hit. There is no reason for that. Now, if that's not enough, the fact that they come from behind you half the time is complete bullshit. You're walking on the right side of the screen typically, so if a satellite flies out, there's no time to react. And even worse, sometimes you have to go upstairs. When you're on higher ground, you can't jump very high because you hit the top of the screen. That means there's barely anywhere that you can go when these fucking things fly out. And when they explode, you're so close to the satellite that the fragments are almost guaranteed to hit you. So Palma, satellites, their real name should be assholes. And number 1, the Flying Spaceman in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on NES is a game that I truly have a love-hate relationship with. I actually think that this game is great. The music is awesome, it's challenging, and it doesn't get as redundant as the beat-em-up style Turtles games. But there are a lot of annoying and unfair things in the game. The jump in the sewers is the most famous example, but the thing about the game that I like the least are some of the enemies that you find in the later stages. The spiders in the warehouses I can't stand at all, especially this one in particular. How are you supposed to get up there? I have never been able to figure that out. Fuck those spiders. I also can't stand some of the enemies that you find in the caves on the journey to find the Technodrome. What even are these things? Alien cockroaches? The one I hate the most is that porcupine monster. The way these guys jump around and attack is just really random and cheap. But the worst enemy in the game, without a doubt, is the Flying Spacemen in the later sections of the Technodrome. Who the fuck made these guys? Satan? Because they are the product of hell. Who the fuck even are these guys in the TMNT universe? Are they stone soldiers Krang equipped with rocket packs or something? Who knows? Even when you have a good amount of scrolls stocked up, these things are just a bitch. They pop up so rapidly, it gives you no time to react. You're forced to duck on the ground like a coward to avoid their laser blasts. And even the scrolls, which are the best items that you can get in the game, don't kill them easily. Seriously, the fucking Shredder is easier to get by than these assholes. If the guys protecting the door are harder to fight than the end boss himself, then you know you are dealing with some supreme motherfucking assholes.